was Jefferson so into this? In fact, why was he even knowledgeable about this place? Well, you got to remember, Thomas Jefferson, up until 1781, had been the governor of Virginia. And Virginia was a much bigger state in those days. It included Virginia, West Virginia, and Kentucky. So Big Bone Lick was in his jurisdiction. So he knew about Big Bone Lick right from the very beginning because he was the governor of the area when the state of Virginia was of that much larger size before it was busted into the 3 states that we know of today. He, on the other hand, was a little bit jealous of his friends Ben Franklin, George Washington, and others who had bones and teeth from there, because Jefferson, as many of you in this room realize, was quite a paleontologist himself, and still didn't have any of the materials from Big Bone Lick, even though he had been governor of the state in which the lick is located. So, in the 1780s, he asked his friend, Daniel Boone, isn't this fun, just name dropping? Why didn't you take 2 semesters of American history? You know, you could just have studied Big Bone Lick and you'd find out everything, anybody was anybody, was associated right here. Daniel Boone, Kentuckian of some note, on his way back from Monticello, where he was visiting Jefferson, to Kentucky, was asked by Jefferson to carry a letter. And Jefferson wrote this letter, which Boone then delivered to this guy, George Rogers Clark, who was over in Louisville. He was the general, he was the commander of the Army of the West. Because after the American Revolution, the Shawnee Indians kept making troubles for the new colonies, because the Shawnees had been and continued to be more in the British camp. Even though we had defeated the British in the East, the fight kept going on right here in the Cincinnati area, Dayton area, Springfield area, etc. Because, well, not because the Shawnees so much like the British, but the Shawnee liked the idea that the British colony was here, because the British didn't seem to be as intrusive. After the American Revolution, the Shawnee lands upon which you are now seated, started to be invaded by first beaver traders, and then later on deer hunters, and then of course colonists and so on. So George Rogers Clark was out in this area, based out of Louisville, Kentucky, and was the commander of the Army of the West of the Young Republic, and was fighting Shawnee Indians, going up from Louisville up toward the Dayton, Springfield area, where a lot of you know is where in fact the large Shawnee villages were. Back in the 1780s, etc., etc. So, Jefferson's letter asks his friend George Rogers Clark, hey, next time on your way north from Louisville, I know you guys probably stop by the lake anyway to procure salt, meat, and so on. Could you, on your return trip, go back, grab some fossils for me? You know. By the way, they didn't know these things were fossils. In fact, Jefferson thought they were bones, and in fact, beyond that, Jefferson thought that this animal was still alive in the American West, whatever animal it was. Jefferson did not believe in extinction. Most people in the 1780s did not believe in an extinction, not only in North America, but throughout the world, simply because to believe in extinction is to believe that God could make a mistake. And that just didn't set well with the Christian community at that time. In other words, if God is so smart and so knowing, he certainly would have never created animals that didn't fit and became extinct. So there was this absolute worldwide belief of creation, and vice versa. There was this absolute arguments, anytime it came up, against any idea of extinction, because extinction was to blaspheme God. Jefferson felt this way, and therefore, for this reason, he felt that this animal, being found in the lick, whatever it was not an extinct animal, but was an animal still wandering around somewhere west of the Mississippi River. Well, anyway, back to the story. So, here we have Mr. General Clark writing back to Jefferson saying, yeah, I'll get it, no problem. I've been to the lake before, I've seen these things, I'll get some on my way back from the next Indian battle. Well, here we go. Dash line, up goes the army, Clark's army from Louisville. They stop, they actually camp at the lick on the way up, go up and cross right at downtown Cincinnati. What you see here is the Licking River, I'm pointing out here, going right up. There's the mouth of the Licking, and you know, therefore, that you can see the ford of the Ohio River there is right at the Cincinnati riverfront. His army of 1,000, 1,500 went up the Ohio River off the map here, up the Little Miami River, up to the Dayton-Springfield area, fought, defeated the Shawnee, even though the Shawnee kept reestablishing themselves after each of these battles, moved into their villages after Clark burned them down. But anyway, they returned the Clark's army along the Great Miami River, came back to the area we know as downtown Cincinnati, crossed again, and on their way back, it was winter and all the bones and teeth were frozen solid in the ground. He couldn't get a single bone or tooth out. By the way, as folks had visited the lick, the easy pickings were taken first. And, you know, as we're getting on here into the 1780s, the things that are still really obviously available are generally partially buried in the ground. And that doesn't work when the ground is frozen solid. So the men, Clark's men, had to make their way back to Louisville, and Clark had to write to Jefferson saying, sorry, we couldn't the United States. William Henry Harrison. And William Henry Harrison, also, like Thomas Jefferson, interested in at least in fossils, in the sense that he was stationed at Fort Washington, downtown Cincinnati today, and during his leaves would go down to Big Bone Lick and take some of the other folks with him to go digging. And he amassed a huge amount of fossils. We're never sure how many, at least 12 huge barrels full. And the reason we know that is because there is written evidence from Harrison himself that he tried, and Jefferson still, unlike many of his friends, didn't have anything from Big Bone Lick. A disappointed fossil collector, you all know that feeling. So, you know, so now other people had a better time of it. Here's another future president. Then put those bones, and he collected Big Bone Lick, on a flatboat going back to Pittsburgh. Now that's not easy because remember the Ohio River goes from Pittsburgh to Cincinnati. So if you're going up, but that's the way folks went in those days. Even without steam, they just poled themselves up the Ohio River to get back east through Pittsburgh. And that's where he was sending his fossils, probably back to his friends and hopefully in museums in the East, because he was he was an American. Even though the European museums now already had several of these things, the American museums still really didn't have any. They were in the hands of private collectors. But anyway, whatever he had never made it. The boat was sunk, and this very large collection of bones is somewhere in the bottom of the Ohio River between here and Pittsburgh. So that collection was lost. That's a story you're going to hear more than once, by the way. It's been very difficult to get these fossils out of the lick, it turns out, to transport them away. A person who had better luck, only because he didn't have to transport them anywhere, was this fella, a Cincinnatian, William Goforth. Dr. Goforth is known locally as the mentor of Dr. Daniel Drake. This is the guy who taught Drake everything that Drake knew about medicine, and Drake turned out knew quite a bit. He even has a hospital named after him to this day. But Goforth, for this evening's talk, is better known as a fossil collector of some abilities. He's a man of science. He was interested in the lick. Went down there with workmen, amassed quite a collection. The word of this collection got back east. Some of the things being found are like the upper palate of this unknown animal with the teeth in place. Oftentimes the teeth, of course, were not in place. Teeth that we talked about before tonight. But here's something really interesting. Goforth is he's digging around and maybe digging into deeper levels. Remember, most of the stuff has been kind of surface collected up and now. Well, whatever's left is going to be deeper down. He starts unearthing a different kind of tooth. Not in the sense it's smaller. In fact, it's the same size tooth, but it sure looks more like an elephant tooth. Well, now we got two unknown animals at Big Bone Lick. You know, it was confusing enough when everybody's trying to figure out what the one unknown animal was. That now there are two, because I said this looks like an elephant tooth, but everybody admits that it's not an elephant tooth. There are some differences still, even with this tooth, as compared to a tooth of either an African or an Asian elephant. So, here's poor Tom Jefferson. You know, he's getting frustrated now. He didn't get the first kind, now there are two kinds down there. And by this time, he's got some power. He's president of the United States. And he says, you know, in 1803, he says, doggone, I'm gonna take another whack at getting some of these things. So he turns to a fellow who he recently commissioned for another job, Meriwether Lewis, and he says to Lewis, he says, on your way west to meet Clark in Louisville, Kentucky. By the way, the Clark we're talking about now is William Clark, the younger brother of George Rogers Clark. He says, Meriwether Lewis, on your way west to Louisville to meet William Clark, why don't you stop by and see this Goforth character? It's Dr. Goforth, who's in Cincinnati, who has quite a collection, and see if he wouldn't be willing to part some of it for the President of the United States. And so Lewis, on his way, coming through the Cincinnati area, stops here, and in fact not only visits Goforth and looks at what he's got here,